No one wants a single mom with baggage. That was what my sister said right there, at her own wedding, holding the microphone and smiling. Hello, I am Mara. I am 34 years old. I am a single mom and an accountant in a coastal city called Veracruz. My son, Griffin, is 10 years old. He is smart, quiet, and incredibly kind. He is everything I ever wanted to raise in a world that can be too cruel. I have learned to keep my head down. I learned to survive in quiet rooms with cold stares, especially within my own family. But that day, standing in a room full of perfect people, listening to my sister laugh while she mocked my life in front of everyone, I finally reached my limit. What she did not know, however, was that the man she was about to marry already knew me. He knew the real me from long before he met her, and he had his own story to tell. I have always liked numbers. They do not lie, and they do not judge. People are a different story. That is why my tiny accounting office above a bookstore felt like home. It was just me, my calculator, and Griffin's drawings taped to the filing cabinet. "Mom, are you almost done?" Griffin poked his head in. His cheeks were red from soccer. He was 10 years old, all energy and elbows with a smile that made the hard days easier. 5 minutes, I said, typing a final line. Homework? I finished spelling, but I need help with history, he said. I laughed. Of course. On the way home, the air smelled like salt and flowers. The city was beautiful in the spring, but I barely noticed it. My head was full of numbers and family obligations. The most recent one was a dinner at my mother's house with my sister, Sienna, and her fiancé. My mother, Elodie, did not ask if we could come. She ordered it. She always had a way of making us feel like guests in our own lives. Sienna was the golden child with shiny hair and a perfect life. Now she was marrying Elias. He was a financial advisor with a face like a movie star. When Griffin and I arrived, Elodie opened the door with her usual tight smile. "You are late." "We are on time," I replied. Inside, everything was perfect. There were lavender candles, roast lamb, and chilled wine. Sienna sat on the sofa like a queen. She barely looked at Griffin. Then Elias stood up and offered me his hand. "Nice to meet you." His warm hazel eyes met mine, and something flickered. "Do I know you?" He crouched down a little. "What grade are you in?" "Fifth," said Griffin. "It is the best year. My volcano exploded at the science fair." "That sounds amazing," Elias said. Griffin laughed. No one in this house ever made him feel seen. But Elias did. Sienna's voice cut through the air. "You aren't wearing that to the wedding, are you?" I looked at my blouse and pants. "It is just a dinner." Elodie added, "We did not ask you to be a bridesmaid, dear, because of your situation." She said the word situation as if my life were a stain on their perfection. I stayed silent, my fingernails digging into my palm. Elias noticed. He clenched his jaw. The dinner was long and full of wedding talk and poisonous comments wrapped in politeness. But Griffin held my hand under the table. He always knew when I needed support. Later, while I was arranging name cards in Elodie's study, Elias walked in with 2 coffees. "Basically, you are organizing this whole wedding," he said. "Someone has to do it," I replied. He watched me. "Did you ever volunteer at the Children's Hospital?" I froze. "Yes, a long time ago." "My sister Juliet was there," he said. "You read to her. You sang to her. She said you made the hospital feel safe." My breath caught in my throat. "She called me the Sun Girl." He nodded slowly. "It was you." Just like that, the air changed. He was no longer just Sienna's fiancé. He was the boy who once watched his sister fade away and remembered the girl who made her smile. After that night in my mother's study, things shifted. Elias began to appear in small ways. He sent a thank you message after I fixed the flower order. He made a quick call to check the seating chart. He always made it seem casual, like work, but I was not foolish. I saw how he stayed a second too long when we spoke. I heard the soft tone when he asked about Griffin. Above all, I saw how Sienna did not notice, or perhaps she did not care. To her, Elias was just another accessory. He was presentable, educated, and convenient. 2 weeks before the wedding, the pressure became a fever. Dress fittings, table arrangements, and guest list corrections were all thrown at me without a single please or thank you. My afternoons disappeared into spreadsheets and napkin samples. When I was not solving Sienna's crises, I was helping Griffin build his volcano for the science project. We worked together at the kitchen table, his hands covered in glue and baking soda. "You are doing too much, Mom," he said one night. I stopped. "Why do you say that?" He shrugged. "You are always tired. You haven't smiled for real in a while." I smiled then, not because he was wrong, but because he saw me. My 10-year-old son saw what no one else in my family bothered to notice. The next day, Elias called me. "Can we meet?" he asked. "Somewhere quiet. I promise it is not about the name cards." We met at a coffee shop near the pier, where the smell of salt and coffee mixed in the air. He looked tired but determined. "I need to ask you something," he said when we sat down, "and I know it is going to be complicated." "Tell me," I replied, wrapping my hands around my cup. "I want you to be my maid of honor." I blinked. "That is not how it works. Sienna didn't even ask me to be in the bridal party." "I know," he said quickly. "She wouldn't do it. But I told her I want this. You have done everything and it feels right." I looked at him steadily. "Elias, are you going to marry my sister?" He leaned toward me. I thought I knew her. I thought I knew what I needed. Someone perfect. Someone loud enough to drown out the grief. But then I saw you again, and I remembered what matters. I shook my head, my heart racing. "This is not about me." "It is," he said softly. "Juliet loved you, and I understand why." I didn't say yes. I couldn't. But I didn't say no either. That night, my phone rang. My mother's name appeared on the screen. "What were you thinking?" Elodie hissed before I could speak. "Sienna is devastated. You had to make it about you, didn't you?" "I didn't ask for anything," I replied, keeping my voice even. "Elias did." "You always play the victim," she snapped. "Just don't ruin her day." "I won't, but if she doesn't want me there, she should say it herself." There was a long pause. "You can't back out now. Elias already told everyone, don't make a scene." I hung up without another word. Griffin was on the sofa building a Lego space station. "Was that Grandma?" he asked without looking up. "Yes." "Was she mean again?" I hesitated. "Let's just say she wasn't very kind." He nodded. "Then don't listen to her. You always tell me to ignore people who are wrong." I laughed despite myself. I guess it is time I followed my own advice. In the days before the wedding, Sienna avoided me completely. No messages, no calls, no passive-aggressive emails. It was almost disturbing. I thought about quitting a dozen times, but then I remembered Elias's face. I remembered how Juliet used to smile when Griffin brought her a drawing. There were moments when I caught Elias looking at me as if he were trying to solve a puzzle he already knew the answer to. There was no flirting, no inappropriate touches. It was just an awareness, as if we were both waiting for something neither of us had the courage to name. And underneath it all was Griffin. At his next soccer game, Elias appeared without warning, standing on the sidelines next to me. "I didn't know you liked kids' sports," I said. "I like seeing that the kids who matter are supported," he replied simply. Griffin scored a goal that day. He ran straight toward us, beaming. Elias crouched down and high-fived him as if it were the most natural thing in the world. That night, when I tucked Griffin in, he whispered, "I wish Elias could be around more." "Maybe," I said. "Why do I like him?" he murmured. "He doesn't talk to me like I'm invisible." I kissed his forehead. "Me too, champion." And so, something began to shift, not just in Elias or me, but in the world around us. The day of the wedding dawned clear and warm. It was one of those spring days the city is famous for. There was a gentle breeze, golden light, and the scent of jasmine in the air. Griffin and I arrived early. He wore a navy blue suit and squeezed my hand, his eyes wide with excitement and nervousness. I wore a sky blue dress. It was simple, elegant, and discreet. I was not there to shine. I just wanted to survive. "You look amazing, Mom," Griffin whispered. His words were worth more than any compliment my family could give me. Inside the church, everything looked perfect. White roses, crystal chandeliers, every detail polished to Sienna's vision. Bridesmaids bustled around in the back room, adjusting straps and drinking champagne. Sienna was at the center of it all in a custom-made dress, shining from head to toe with a sharp, unreadable expression. She barely looked at me. "Try not to trip when we walk down the aisle." "Good to see you too," I said, keeping my tone even. Elodie was sitting in a corner, already criticizing the photographer's angles. When she saw me, she muttered, "That dress is very you." I didn't flinch. All my life they had called me simple. It didn't hurt anymore. The ceremony passed in a haze. I walked behind Sienna, held her bouquet, and arranged her veil. I did everything with calm and dignity, not for her, but for me, and for Griffin, who was in the front row next to Elias's father, swinging his legs nervously. His face lit up with pride every time our eyes met. And for Elias. From the altar, he caught my gaze and gave me a firm, warm nod. But nothing prepared me for what came next. The reception was in a grand hall at the main theater. High ceilings, candlelight, and towers of champagne sparkling under crystal lamps. It was extravagant and cold, like almost everything my family valued. Dinner had barely been served when Sienna took the microphone. "I want to thank everyone for coming today," she said sweetly, "especially my incredible bridal party, and of course my maid of honor, Mara." There was polite applause. I nodded calmly. Then her voice changed. It was barely a thread, but I recognized the sharp edge. "And I truly admire her," she continued, tightening her smile, "for raising a child alone. That takes courage, especially when no one has ever really wanted you." The room went still. A few people let out uncomfortable laughs. "He is still available, folks," Sienna added, laughing. "Does anyone want something secondhand with a kid included?" Laughter rippled through the room. Elodie laughed too loud. My stomach twisted. Griffin's small hand found mine under the table. He was shaking. I stood up. I had to get him out of there, out of that place, out of that cruelty. Then a chair scraped loudly behind me. Elias stood up. The room fell silent again. He walked over to Sienna and gently took the microphone from her. "I need to say something," he said, his voice firm and low. Sienna let out a nervous laugh. "Elias, what are you doing?" He held up a hand. She froze. "This was supposed to be my wedding," he said, "but tonight reminded me that no amount of money, flowers, or appearances can hide the truth." Gasps were heard around the room. He turned and looked at me. "Mara and I didn't meet last month. We met years ago at the Children's Hospital. My sister Juliet was dying. Mara was the one who sat with her, read to her, and made her laugh. She was our light in the darkest moment." I stood motionless. Griffin squeezed my hand tighter. "And she brought her son, too," Elias continued. "Little Griffin drew stars and planets for Juliet. She had them taped next to her bed. She called him her little astronaut." The room was in absolute silence. Elias turned to the crowd. So when I heard what was said here tonight about Mara, about Griffin, I knew I couldn't go through with this. Sienna's jaw dropped. "You don't mean that?" Elias looked at her without blinking. "I absolutely do. I am canceling the wedding." More gasps. A glass broke somewhere in the back. Elodie stood up, pale. "You don't know what you are doing." "I know exactly what I am doing," Elias said. "Send me the bill." Then he walked over to Griffin and knelt in front of him. "Thank you," he said, "for being the light that you are." Griffin blinked, unsure, but nodded. Elias stood up and looked at me. "Come with me." I didn't move immediately. Everything felt frozen, as if my entire life had brought me to this impossible instant. But then I took his hand. Together we walked out, passing Sienna's tears, passing my mother's glaring eyes, and passing every person who had ever made me feel less. We didn't stop until we were outside under the stars. Elias hailed a taxi. "I know a place," he said. "It is quiet by the water." The restaurant he took us to was a seafood shack facing the port. It had wooden floors, hanging lights, and the sound of waves nearby. For the first time all day, I could breathe. We didn't talk much during the meal. Griffin colored on a napkin. Elias watched the water. Finally, he spoke. "I am sorry." "Why?" I asked. "For the speech, the disaster, everything." "Don't apologize for telling the truth," I said. He nodded. "After Juliet died, I got lost. Sienna was noise. I thought that was what I needed." "But it wasn't," I said. "No," he whispered. "It wasn't." His phone vibrated on the table. Sienna's name lit up the screen. He silenced it. "She will keep calling," I said quietly. "She will talk to my lawyer," he replied. Griffin looked up. "Elias? Tell me, champion. Do you remember those drawings, the stars I made for the lady in the hospital?" Elias smiled. "That was my sister. She loved them. She said I was funny," Griffin said. "You were her hero," Elias replied. The waves rolled in and out. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like peace. The next morning, we visited Juliet's grave. The cemetery was quiet, set among tall trees overlooking the water. Elias walked slowly with white daisies in one hand and a small stone in the other. The stone was painted with a yellow sun and stars, its edges worn by time. Griffin walked beside him with his hands in his suit pockets. "Was this hers?" Griffin asked, looking at the stone. Elias nodded. She kept it by her bed. We reached the headstone. It was simple and clean, with one word engraved on it: beloved. Elias knelt, placed the flowers, and then carefully set the stone beside them. "She always said your drawings made her feel brave." Griffin stared. "I didn't think she would remember me." "She never forgot you." I stood behind them with a heart that felt heavy but soft. It didn't feel like grief. It felt like closure. Elias stood up and reached for my hand. I let him take it. 1 year later, my life had changed in ways I never thought possible. I opened a small financial services office downtown, Vane Financial Services. The name had been Elias's idea. "You built this," he told me. "Let them know." The place was warm and honest. It wasn't fancy, but it was real. On the wall behind my desk hung Griffin's latest drawing, a rocket ship flying through a field of stars. Work was steady. Word spread. People came not just for advice, but for someone who would listen. At home, Griffin blossomed. He was stronger now, more confident. He became the kind of boy who defended others, not just himself. And Elias? He never missed a single game, a dinner, or a bedtime story. We weren't married, not yet, but we were a family. As for Sienna and my mother, Elodie, they faded into the background. Sienna's career never recovered from the wedding scandal. People talked. She stopped getting calls for work. She left quietly without a word. My mother tried to reach out with voicemails and awkward apology cards, but I didn't answer. I had nothing cruel to say. I just had nothing left for them. Some endings don't need revenge. They just need silence. It was Christmas Eve when Elias pulled out a small box. Griffin was asleep on the sofa, the light from the Christmas tree dancing on his face. Elias and I were by the fire with hot chocolate in our hands. "This was Juliet's," he said, opening the lid. Inside was a vintage emerald ring. "She told me to give it to someone who reminded me what love means. That is you." My eyes filled with tears before I could speak. "Mara," he said, "will you marry me?" I looked at the ring, at the sleeping boy under the tree, and at the man who saw me before I could see myself. "Yes," I whispered. Outside, a cold, light rain began to fall. It was soft, as if peace had finally found a place to land. There is something curious about healing. You don't notice it at first. It doesn't come with fanfare or fireworks. It is quieter than that. It is like a door you forgot was closed, suddenly swinging open. For years, I thought surviving was the best I could hope for. I thought if I kept my head down, if I stayed useful, if I stayed quiet, maybe I would earn a crumb of grace. I thought love was earned through sacrifice, but I was wrong. The love that heals, the love that lasts, is never about proving you deserve something. It is about being seen exactly as you are and being chosen anyway. When Sienna mocked me at her wedding, I could have let that define me. I could have walked away once more, absorbing the cruelty my family had given me for years. But I didn't, because that public, humiliating, horrible moment became something else. It became a mirror, a line drawn in the sand. And on the other side of that line was Elias, choosing not perfection, but truth. And beside us was Griffin, my son, my anchor, my reason. I don't know what the future holds. I don't expect life to be easy just because I finally walked toward the light. But I do know this. Now I have a home. Not just a roof over our heads, but a space where we laugh, argue with respect, and let ourselves be human. I have a work that matters, a son who shines, and a man who never asked me to make myself small. Sienna once called me second-hand, but second-hand means lived in, tested, and resilient. And I choose that any day over being shiny and hollow. To whoever is listening, if you were ever told you weren't enough, that you weren't wanted, that you weren't worthy, I am here to tell you that was never the truth. You were always more than what they saw. You were always worth choosing. I see you, and I hope that one day you see yourself too.